Hello and welcome back. We are going to be working on mod guides 5 and 6 today. They're going to be combined together because it's a lot of definitions and ideas rather so much than an application. And first, we're going to work on the module 5, which is collecting data and sampling. We've got some definitions here. Remember, you can feel free to pause and record the definitions that are written down. Make sure you match up. Notice that in the first 3 options, they say define the following, and then on the second question, it says define the bad ways to sample. Convenient sampling and voluntary response samplings are not good. And one of the things I found interesting in the text is that when we're talking about convenient sampling, it overrepresents, the book states, it overrepresents white middle class or retired people, which I don't necessarily think it has to be white middle class or retired people. It can be any sort of population that you're overrepresenting, dependent upon where you're convenient sampling. So if I'm going to go down to a ballpark and sample, that's not necessarily just going to be white middle class or retired people. It's going to be people who are avid sports fans. Versus if I go to an ice cream restaurant, that's going to be people who like sweets. So it just depends on where you are going as to what bias you're representing. In voluntary response, this happens, I think, every day. I do something, or I get an email, or I'm online, or I'm on a phone call, and I get asked, do you want to participate in a survey? Everybody's trying to collect data now, and so everyone's asking, do you want to participate in surveys? And the only people, I think, every time I say it, I'm always like, no, I don't want to do it. And really the only people who typically answer those surveys are people who are either super angry or super happy. Like, oh my God, I have to tell everybody about this, or oh my God, I have to tell everybody about this. So it just depends on your feelings as to whether you participate or not. So the main goal of good sampling methods, the 3 above, random sampling, or simple random sampling, is to eliminate bias, and we want an equally likely chance of being chosen. So our goal is to eliminate bias, and we do this by making sure that everyone has an equally likely chance of being chosen. When we talk about a population, I'm not talking about the United States population. It's a population of reference and a question. Say I wanted to determine whether female toddlers preferred a doll. My population is not going to be the United States. It's going to be female toddlers who in a certain area or whatever I describe it to be. So I want you to think about population in terms of the question that we're framing rather than just the population of the United States. And in the mod guide overview in Canvas, I mentioned that column with Ann Landers. So take a second to read the different polls that you were given. This is a learn by doing from page 19, and it talks about marriage and children, and there's 2 different ways in which the questions are worded. So go ahead and pause the video and read this again to briefly recap. Moving on, we want to know which explanation best explains the difference in the results for these 2 polls. Well, was it voluntary response, convenient sampling, sampling variability, or confidentiality? And notice that we already know what voluntary response and convenient sampling is, but we're talking about sampling variability here, and confidentiality kind of gives you a little bit of a definition here. But those who responded have strong opinions, yes. Both surveys underrepresent the opinions of people who do not read newspapers and magazines. Well, which one, I need you guys to focus on this, which one best explains. So while this may be true, the first one is more true. Due to chance, no 2 samples are ever the same. That is true, but that's not really what the best difference is. And confidentiality, it's not the best thing, and that's not necessarily going to influence your responses. Okay, so considering the example for random sample size matters, what's the characteristic of the dot plot that shows the random samples are not biased? Well, many samples have results that are above and below the actual population value. That's what we're looking for. There's no systematic favoring of one response over another. What happens to the dot plot when the size of the samples is increased? Well, when you get more samples, you actually have less variability, and the dots become closer to the results of the true population value. Okay, now I want you to read the Learn by Doing, recapping from page 20, about the ballots. The spokesperson that was critical, we want to know whether his criticism was valid. And really we're wondering whether there's some sort of bias. And remember, our way that we eliminate bias is we do random sampling. And so because there was a random sample, his criticism is not valid. What if, would his criticism be valid if only 1,000 people were randomly selected versus the number that were originally selected? And no, because the sample was randomly selected. It doesn't matter what your sample size is. That gives you an idea of variability. If there's a large sample, there's less variability, but that doesn't mean, that's not going to determine whether a sample was, whether it was valid or not. We're going to move on to the Did I Get This from page 20. Which of the following is an example of a census? Well, we're in a year of a census right now where we're trying to gather information on the entire population of the United States. And a census is when we gather information from the entire population. Well, the U.S. population census, it would be great if that was a true census, but this is not actually true because you're going to miss someone. The population, the amount of time it takes for the census to be collected, the data to be collected, somebody has died or somebody has been born, so it's not 100% accurate. Let's look at the first one. It's a poll of students at a college by a pop-up window in the register, and students have the option to answer, and they try and catch the remaining students at the admissions window when they register in person. Well, not everybody's going to go to get an online registration form, or they're not going to register in person. It might have been done on one day, but that's not going to be every single person that went to the college. The next one, survey parents whose children attend a local elementary school and randomly select 50 parents. They're only looking at 50 parents. They're not looking at all of the parents. Third option, weigh every child at an elementary school for a study. Yes, every child, every person in that population is included. That concludes Module 5. We're going to move on to Module 6's guide.